Welcome back to a special edition of Hannity. President Trump's America First agenda in full effect. Get this. After the United States negotiated a $285 million cut to the United Nations bloated budget. Of course, this comes as President Trump and U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley blasted, and I mean blasted, the UN General Assembly for holding a vote to rebuke the United States' decision to move its embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Watch this.
The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit.
The United States, the people that live here are great citizens that love this country. They're tired of this country being taken advantage of, and we're not going to be taken advantage of any longer.
By the way, as an added note, Guatemala now announcing that they will move their embassy into Jerusalem as well. So I wonder when the vote's coming up in the UN on that. In the wake of their anti-Israel, anti-American positions, and with the U.S. contributing more, and I say more, to the UN's budget than any other nation, should the Trump administration take even more financial steps to put them on notice? Joining us now, former United States Ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor John Bolton, as well as COO of the East-West Institute and a retired U.S. naval officer, Dr. Bill Parker, who, by the way, author of a great book that I have on my shelf and I read, Guaranteeing America's Security in the 21st Century. You two gentlemen have been at work, whether in the military, in the ambassadorial corps, and in administrations doing this job. First to you, Ambassador Bolton. Great to see you again. I know where you stand on this, but I want to hear it from you. I think I know where you stand on this. What about this cut? What is it really, and what does it mean?
Well, this particular cut was baked in the cake before the Jerusalem vote, but certainly it's worthwhile to get the budget lower even by that amount. But I think it provides the Trump administration with an excellent pivot point to look at the larger question of what elements of the UN system are functioning successfully and what are not, and to move away from the system of international taxation, in effect, that we're under now, where, as you say, we pay 22% of the regular budget, 28% of the even larger peacekeeping budget. And just decide that we're going to contribute voluntarily to what we think works and either substantially reduce or zero out of those programs and offices that we don't think work. Now, this would be like a tsunami through the UN system, but if we could carry through with it, it would actually make it more efficient and more effective.
All right, now there's an ambassador I know. He might have been on this show with us, or he might even be here now, Dr. Parker, who said that sometimes in diplomacy, your choices aren't that good. I'm using the cleaned up version of this. Do you think this sends a signal to the United Nations?
Look, the United Nations is a very important body. There's no doubt about that. Very important. But at the end of the day, efficiency and effectiveness matters. And the reality is, as Ambassador Bolton just pointed out, 22% of that total funding came from the United States, where 9% came from Japan and 8% came from China, and the rest are much smaller. So to say we need to get more efficient and more effective, I think is spot on. We do need to take a good hard look at that. But we also need to realize how important the United Nations is to the overall body of the globe.
All right, so Ambassador Bolton, as I mentioned, Guatemala now, they're announcing, and other nations are indicating they may do this, in moving their embassies to Jerusalem. Is there another story here? Have you discerned anything from this?
Well, look, the government of Israel has been working on this for some time, and I'm sure they're going to try and take advantage of it. I think other countries may make that decision as well. I think the president's biggest problem, having recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, his biggest problem in moving the U.S. embassy is going to be at the U.S. State Department, where they just don't like this idea one little bit. And I think the president's a real estate executive. He knows how to get things built. My advice to him would be to move forward, select the site, do the planning, and start turning dirt as soon as possible. That, in effect, I think would really induce other countries to look at moving into West Jerusalem, which is where all of them would be, without prejudice to the ultimate outcome of the peace negotiations.
You know, on the other side of this, Dr. Parker, Turkey has announced that they are also going to move their consulate, I believe is what they call it, to Jerusalem, and this is their connection to Palestine. Does that indicate anything about the geopolitical or the regional political issues?
It indicates that this is a complex environment, and it's not going to get any easier anytime soon. When you look at the Sunni Shia issues around the globe, when you look at what's going on in the Middle East right now, that's not going to change. So the reality is that the complexities are there, and you're going to continue to see countries decide whether or not they want to move their embassies to Jerusalem, or they want to keep them in other places.
All right, gentlemen, let's bring this together, because another issue on the table, North Korea, and that has been, we've seen a seed change in years, decades-long policy, at least since the 90s, in how we deal with North Korea. First to you, Ambassador Bolton. Russia now saying, and this came out in the news this morning, they're willing to be the broker of a deal between U.S. and North Korea. But from the historical track, what do we see, and where are we now with North Korea? Could Russia play a role?
Well, I think it would be a waste of oxygen. Look, we've negotiated with North Korea for 25 years. They've committed on at least 4 separate and distinct occasions to give up their nuclear weapons program in exchange for tangible benefits. They've lied every time they've made that commitment. There's simply no evidence that in year 26 the North Koreans are going to do this any differently. In fact, we've got tonight a very interesting comparison. Reuters has a story that says China's statistics show no oil exported to North Korea last month. But we've got papers published in the South Korean press overnight showing at least 30 examples of ship-to-ship transfers of oil between Chinese and North Korean vessels during the last couple of months. So this is something that we've been played by the North Koreans and played by the Chinese for a long time. I think we're still waiting for China to do something dramatic, but if it doesn't, we're faced with some very, very unpleasant choices unless you're prepared to see North Korea with nuclear weapons.
All right. So, Dr. Parker, you have been involved in this to some degree. You have traveled a great deal to brief others and talk about this issue. Walk us through the scenario of where we are now and what we should do or not do.
So this is a complex environment in the backyard of China, of South Korea, of Japan. And when you look at those 3 countries and what they're dealing with right now, if they do nothing, if we do nothing as a globe, and we allow North Korea to maintain their nuclear weapons program and advance them to the point that they're close to right now, what you're going to end up with is likely a nuclear South Korea, a nuclear Japan, and therefore a concerned China that increases their nuclear capability and their defense capability. But it gets better. It gets better because then Iran sees that North Korea, quote, got away with it. And now what you end up with a potential of nuclear weapons in and around the Gulf as well. And if that happens, you're going to end up losing control of that fissile material, and that's a very complicated problem. And we haven't even talked about the finances and the issues on the impact of the economy yet.
Well, before we get to that, South Korea's view of this, specifically South Korea, where are we with them and where do they stand?
Well, South Korea is interesting because before you can talk about a unified Korea, you have to talk about a unified South Korea. And to talk about a unified South Korea, you have to ask the question of whether or not you want a unified peninsula, and then whether or not you want WMD within South Korea itself. If you talk to government officials over there, many of them will say that you need the nuclear capability in order to execute a mutual assured destruction capability from South Korea towards the North Koreans. And Japan would say the same thing.
All right, back to you, Ambassador. Are we at a new potential Cold War in modern form?
Well, I think we're at a critical point in terms of the 50-year effort to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, because if we fail to stop North Korea, and they are very close to the ability to hit targets in the United States with thermonuclear weapons, then I think that effort will have crashed into complete failure, because it won't just be North Korea. They will sell these capabilities to anybody with hard currency, to Iran if they're not already doing work together on the nuclear side, to terrorist groups if they could come up with the money, to other nuclear weapon states. And then you're going to see this proliferation worldwide. It will be a much more dangerous world. Trump inherited this. He didn't create this situation, but it will be on his watch that we either stop it in North Korea or we face a real expansion of nuclear and actually biological and chemical weapons as well all around the world.
Dr. Bill Parker, CEO at the East West Institute, and a great new book, Guaranteeing America's Security in the 21st Century. And Ambassador Bolton, you have been working hard to guarantee our security for many years. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.